Wyn and Chris Daniell have been running their macadamia nut business in the Bay of Plenty for over 20 years. It took a decade for their trees to produce commercial quantities of fruit, but once established, the trees are expected to continue bearing for over 100 years.
Property is 8.2 hectares. It runs down to the Tauranga Harbour. There's about 7 hectares that's in horticulture, now split between 3 crops: kiwi fruit, avocados and macadamias. They're a native of Australia. They're a subtropical tree, grow in relatively restricted places, so the volume is always going to be capped, particularly out of New Zealand. The kernel, once harvested, is capable of being stored. It's quite robust. It can be stored without the need for cool storage and can be distributed internationally again without the need for refrigerated distribution systems, along with being a wonder food in terms of its health properties. When we came here in 1980, the property was entirely kiwi fruit with a smattering of citrus, and we endured some very good years. And after 12 years of doing that, prices reflected the fact that the volume of kiwi fruit had increased, and we were apprehensive about the merit of soldiering on with a monoculture. And we looked around as to what was appropriate to diversify into and ended up making a decision on these, back in the days when Google wasn't available to help you do your research. We've got 900 odd trees compressed into 2 and a bit hectares, which is a high planting density. They're cropping phenomenally well, with a little bit of a biennial trend, but that comes after nearly 20 years since we established them in amongst an existing crop. The market's predominantly domestic. We do sell a very small proportion of our total offshore, but we lack the critical mass that you need to be able to send offshore in any great volume. This was actually recognised in Australia by a Kiwi who went there years ago, Henry Bell, and it's an A38 variety, and they're obviously pretty happy here. These were all grafted in the nursery and planted out as little seedling, or as little grafted plants maybe this high, all of which had to be frost protected every night when frost was due for the first maybe 3 or 4 years, and subsequent to which we became oblivious to the frost. So yes, they're hard to establish and very frost prone in those juvenile years. And thereafter, it's just a matter of waiting until nature says they're ready to go. In our case, it was a decade after planting before we got commercial volumes. It's a substantial period of time and not one that's attractive to a lot of horticulturalists. I'm mindful that you could grow 3 rotations of Christmas trees in the same time. We irrigated them in their first couple of years. In 1994, when we first planted them, it was a drought year, so we were lucky we had irrigation in the block. The block had high fertility anyway, but we maintained the fertiliser regime that was appropriate for the crop that was in here previously. And subsequently, we've taken soil and foliar tests on an annual basis, and none of the experts can see that there's anything deficient. So we've had about a decade or more of no artificial fertiliser. They are prone to getting the problem with the green veggie bug that attacks early in January when the husk and the shell is unformed, and you don't even know you've been attacked until you've harvested and dried the nuts and then find the kernel's all got a little blemish on it. So he's the main villain for us at the present time. Further north in New Zealand there's the guava moth, and we hope it doesn't come here, and we're quite paranoid about doing things that don't facilitate its introduction because it's very hard to eradicate. So we hope we can keep that away. The other mammal that's a predator is the rat. So we have our little bit of fun and games with them, and most of the time we're on top. We've got them arranged in different varieties in the direction of the prevailing wind with a view to assisting with pollination. But that said, the bees love it, and the beekeepers actually love us, queued up to put the hives in here, and the bees just go ballistic. The flowers are very fragrant and obviously have a high yield of nectar. All our macadamia trees are varieties that drop their crop when they're ready, and that occurs over maybe a 3-month period. We harvest fortnightly, which means that we have to keep the grass well mown, mow immediately after harvest. We harvest over about 9 months of the year because we've got the 4 varieties and they tend to overlap. So this particular variety that we're standing by now, it's the first off the rank and it's sort of slowing down when the next starts, and so it is right through till December.
Once they're harvested, they're taken down to the shed. We have to remove this outer green fibrous husk, and then we have the nut, which has a very hard shell. And then we dry. It is further dried in the Waikato where they are processed. When we dehusk them, we're then grading them, having a look for smalls, for those that are perhaps last year's nuts, and then they're dried. It's got a very tough outer shell. Once it is dried, the kernel will rattle inside, and that goes through another process and the macadamias are cracked. Then they are further processed. They are put into nitrogen flush bags. They're graded into different sizes, into holes, small holes, large holes and pieces, and they can be utilised for different products. We are our own marketer, so it's up to us how we do this versatile product. We have the natural product, which is becoming more popular. When we first went into this for the beneficial health reasons, but became confectionery with chocolate, dark chocolate and milk chocolate. But now people see the health benefits and go for the raw nut. They're rich in antioxidants, a healthy source of protein, vitamin E and B complex, and studies have shown that a handful of macadamias will help to reduce your LDL and total cholesterol. Our main market is the Tauranga Farmers Market, and a market in Howick, and then we also have cafes, bakeries, restaurants.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.